I'm going to talk about something that I think is really timely right now, and it's applying holistic value creation to government or running a country. I do a lot of work helping organizations in the for-profit world, large, small, public, private, as well as nonprofit worlds, create value faster. And I apply something I call the MIND methodology. It's a very intentional, straightforward way of creating value faster as an organization. I always focus on holistic value, which is material, emotional energy, and spiritual value creation. Material is obvious. Emotional energy, it's how it feels to work there. I mean, it really is the X factor for leaders and how they show up. And then the spiritual value creation, just connectedness, how well the team members connected to each other, to their suppliers, their customers, all of that. And it can be applied to any organization of any type or size. And when I do that work, leaders in the for-profit and nonprofit world, they're super curious. They're applying this stuff, and almost without exception, they get better results from doing this work. And then I find it fascinating that when I start having the discussion around applying these principles to government or how a state or a country is run, depending on a political party affiliation, brains will just kind of turn off. It's fascinating to me that on one hand, they totally agree, but when you start applying it to how a country is run, it turns off and it doesn't apply anymore. And it feels to me like it fully turns into a personality contest and not a policy contest, which is really what it should be. And I thought it was interesting. About a year ago, I was asked by the state of Vermont to speak to about 800 of their leaders, and I did this virtually, about how to execute more effectively on their strategic plans. And I think the thinking was, resources may get tight in the next couple of years, and they want to make sure they're making the best of what they have. And so that's great. So I'm going to apply my value creation lens thinking. What is the most important number for the state of Vermont, or really any state or any country? How would we think about that? And that number, at the top and sort of guiding the value they create, it really should be a reflection of the value that organization is designed to create. So I started out the presentation and I said, hey, here's how I think about it as a citizen. The number one job of government is to create better conditions for the citizenry to work, live, learn, and play at a lowering relative cost over time. And that's how I started the presentation. And I was very happy to see all of these very positive affirmation emojis flying across the screen. So they got it. They were into it. That's what they want to do. It's absolutely fantastic. For some reason, there seems to be a disconnect with a lot of our elected and even unelected leaders in government around value creation. And I think it's helpful to kind of put it in perspective. When I think about virtue, to me, practicing real virtue in the world is creating objectively measurable value and holistic value, if at all possible. So material, emotional, and spiritual value. And at the same time, pushing back on things that are taking value out of the world. One of the challenges I have with government and all the advertising around political campaigns and everything else is it seems to be taking value out of the world, not adding it back in. So I believe you're either practicing real virtue, and all of us can do it at a small scale to a macro scale. Everybody should be pitching in and trying, or you're taking value out of the world by rigging the game in some way. And my challenge, and it's not everyone in government, but my challenge is the political environment is it's a culture of rigging the game to take value out of the world and not add it back. And so when I think about our elected leaders, how do we identify leaders and elect them, essentially vote for them, that want to create objectively measurable value in the world, actually practice virtue? They're going to create better conditions for the citizenry to work, live, learn, and play at a lowering relative cost over time. I think that's what we all want. And it really comes down to policy a lot more than personality. Personality doesn't mean that somebody's capable. Credentials doesn't mean that somebody is capable of doing anything. So I think what we're looking for is those that can create real value in the world. And it's kind of interesting. Over the last probably 8 or so years, I've spoken to thousands of high school students, mostly seniors, about the virtues of entrepreneurship. And these are typically smaller groups, about 25 to 50 students at a time. And as I'm going through this, I kind of level set the start of the conversation. And, most don't believe they'll be able to do much. And what I love is by the end of the 90-minute guided conversation, they feel like they can start anywhere and go everywhere. It's incredible. But a big part of this, if they're going to have a business, and I tell them that anyone that creates a job is a hero of mine, because that's one more person that can contribute to supporting their family. When you do create a business, the environment from which you create value as a business is largely determined by our elected leaders, because they create policies that create the conditions from which we create value as a business. And we want tailwinds to help us go forward. We don't want headwinds. And so I go through my process for voting and how I think about it. Of course, at the top, it's the main job that they have to do. And then I've got some, pillars that they're basically filters for me that I think about, passing a test when I vote for folks. And sometimes, actually, most of the time, really, I'm voting for folks that'll move it in the wrong direction the slowest, because not very many are actually, in my belief, committed to moving it forward in a positive direction. But still, they create the conditions from which we create value as a business. And when I talk to the kids about it, quite a few of the seniors would say, our teachers say, vote Democrat no matter what. And I always respond when they say that, congratulations, you have a process for voting. And I would encourage you to develop a process for voting that creates better conditions for your family and the communities that are important to you. So think about policies, like what are the rules of engagement, the conditions from which everybody is creating value? Do we want headwinds or tailwinds? One of my filters is elevating self-esteem. And I asked the kids the question, would you feel better about yourself if you were dependent on family members or government to take care of yourself financially? And I can never even finish the sentence. And the kids say, no, we want to be fully self-reliant. We don't want to be dependent on anyone. So I think that's fantastic. And I think policies have to kind of promote that in my view. So having a process for voting, I think is incredibly important, because it does create better conditions for us. And finding folks that we can vote for that have the right policies that, allow us to, create more value as a family, through the communities that are important to us, is something I really hope everybody spends a lot more time thinking about this election cycle. But this post here is about holistic value creation. It's about applying it to business, for-profit, nonprofit, and it absolutely should be applied to government going forward. And every leader out there should be thinking about the value that they are supposed to be creating within their team, for the organization, all of it. And it should be net positive value. In other words, if a company makes a ton of money, but they take a lot more money out of the world because they rigged the game in some way, that's not practicing virtue. That's not net positive value creation. So all of us as leaders should be creating net positive value in the world.